Hi, I'm Mary Wong and welcome to my workshop. Today I'm going to do a little bit of forging to make a pendant a little more interesting. I've got a little beach pebble here, and I found it on the beach when I took my mom on this trip. So it's nothing special, but it's a nice size. So I've already made the bezel so we can skip forward to the forging. I decided to put a little interesting feature on the back. This is a famous rock on the coast called Haystack Rock. So I cut that out. That's going to be an extra surprise. I made a little bunny rabbit here. Come here, little bunny rabbit. There we go. I cut him out of some sterling silver. Just a little silhouette of a bunny. I may not even put an eye in it. I'd like just that little silhouette, and he's going to hang down below. I'll figure out that attachment later. And so I'm going to take also a little accent stone, maybe this beautiful sapphire, which will go up here in this little area there. I could put this together very simply with just the bezel, a bail, and even the bunny hanging down if I wanted. But to make it more interesting, I'm going to forge a little surround and a one-piece surround and bail. And it's going to come and have a little space here where the bunny dangles, come up around, flip over on itself, go behind, and create a curlicue. So I'm going to take this piece of silver, in this case it's square, and I'll forge it out to be the dimension I want it to be and the length before I do all the curling around and bending. To get it to the dimension I want, I'm going to have to hammer it and anneal it several times. But by doing that, I can get it to do what I want. So that's the ticket, and then this will all come together and be this hopefully very cute little memory piece for my mom about our trip. So with that, I'm going to get on to the next step, which is a lot of noise making and hammering. So the thing you'd need to do some hammering and shaping is some secure type of metal block to hammer on. And you can use, one of these conventional bench blocks. You can use any sort of piece of steel you have. And I'm going to use this vise. We know we need it for the bail end. I want to widen this. So what we want to do to widen it, you need a hammer that will spread things. This ball on this ball peen will spread things. Probably this needs to be flattened around here. It's going to be somewhere in here is going to be the front of that bail, and this part will bend around. So probably this whole thing needs to be spread, and then when you will flip it on this side, and this will get thinned over here. This is going to get thinner here. So it's going to get wider here and thinner here. And thin. Okay, well, right now it's probably a little bit hard. So we're going to hammer it for a little bit, and then we'll have to anneal it. So let's get going. Hang on to it. Make sure you're tightened down there. Flip it over. See, it's getting a curve to it, but it is spreading a little. You know what I don't like? So there's a lot of texture on this. This one's a lot smoother. So do take that into consideration. In the long run, I might actually just do a hammered texture, so I'm not going to worry too much. The tool marks have to be taken out. So if you're worried about that, change your hammering surface accordingly. Thinner and wider. That's what we want for the bail. I'm going to flip it over again. This is getting a little stiff, so we're going to anneal it soon. Okay, this whole end needs just to be longer and thinner. Just keep moving it around, and it's expanding and lengthening as you do this. But we have the wider area here. We're going to make that wider after we anneal it. This end, let's work on this a little bit. It's going to come down and around, and it needs to be thin this direction. I It needs to be thin all the way down. Okay, this is getting pretty stiff, so now we're going to anneal it. But we're getting some stretching and thinning and thickening. We're just going to continue. So let's come over to the torch. Okay, now the purpose of annealing is to soften it, because once we've been hammering on it, it compresses everything together and work hardens it. So now it's not going to flatten anymore. It's going to be hard to bend, and indeed you could even get some fatigue and crack it if you have some stress cracks show up if you tried to bend it in this state. So let's anneal it, and that will get all those molecules to realign how they're supposed to be, and then you quench it. What I'm doing is I'm dipping it in some boric acid and alcohol first to put some fire scale protection on there, and I'm going to then burn that off. And so we'll heat this up to a nice red hot and then quench it, and then it'll be nice and soft and will work much better. You want a flame that is not too hot and a little bit bushy for annealing, and so I'm using this flame. This is the hottest part of the flame is right here at this tip, and it's just got a hint of yellow on it. You want it a little bit bushy because the idea is to heat it evenly. I'm going to heat this up. Have some tweezers ready to pick it up with, and you move the flame back and forth. There. And heat it evenly. When it gets to I guess you want to call it a cherry red, hold it there for a little bit and then quench it. So we're just heating it along. You can use whatever torch you have. Sometimes I use a mini torch. I have this one set up as well. And you don't need a small torch to do small work. I used this torch for 20 years and did everything with it. Okay, now I'm getting the color. If you can see the color, make sure you get the whole thing. Keep it at that temperature for 20 seconds or something, and then don't let it cool off, and then quench it. You could quench it in your pickle. I just quenched it in some water. And turn your torch off. Now it is ready to hammer, and it's going to just start to spread out much more easily, because it was kind of hard when I started. If you want, at this point, you could pickle it in case it has a little bit of scale or alcohol and boric acid residue on it. So I'm pickling it for a second. That's your acid bath. If you use Sparax, that's fine. I use the ascorbic acid, which is basically vitamin C. It's non-toxic, and I like it much better. If you were going to roll something out after you've annealed it, super important to make sure it's 100% dry and that there is no flux or boric acid and alcohol residue on there, because that's going to mess up your rolling mill. So we're going to just keep hammering where we were. I'm going to be spreading this, and it's much softer now. You can just feel it. It's going to spread out more. Oh yeah, that's doing much better. Okay, it's probably a good dimension for that bale. Now let's go down here. What we wanted to do was thin this quite a bit so we can make that. Annealing it makes all the difference. Now you see how much dimension I'm getting to that? Yeah, so I'm going to bring it longer this direction. So you can see I've got a nice thick area, wide area where the bail is. And then I've made it thin, coming down this direction here. That's going to go around behind the bail and curl around. Probably can take it a little further. Make sure we're still tight there. Flip it. You have to remember that you're not necessarily forging into an exact shape. You can, but you don't have to. You can do a lot of shaping. After you've done your basic form, you may go in and do a lot of filing and kind of coaxing different shapes out of it. So right now I'm just trying to get a general idea, but I like that. Okay, now we're going to go down to this end because we want a similar, it's going to come down and then go around the bottom. So I want a similar thinness there, so I'm going to draw the whole end out longer. Let's see. You may want to thinner this direction too. And then a little bit this direction. But by now we're hardening up again, so it's time to anneal it one more time. When you're looking at the sketch, do we have enough to do what we need to do? If this is where our bail is here and bending around, is there enough material to do all of the bends we want? And I see we have to make it a little bit longer. Okay, I've annealed it again. We're going to go for one more round, and then we'll probably anneal it again and then do the actual shaping of the bail. So let's make sure. I think we have enough for the bail. I think what I need to do is make these ends longer and thinner. So let's work on those. If you want to change what's happening to your material, like you want less hammer marks, change your hammer. This is a planishing hammer. It's a much more gradual dome, and it's going to leave far fewer marks. So that smooths out the surface already without having to do as much filing away. So if you want to change something, change your tool. You might notice what can happen is it starts to curve one direction or the other. That means it's getting more compression on one side and is spreading. So then go to the other side and compensate and put some spread on the other side. I just did that and corrected this so that this is now a very nice straight piece, and it was getting a bit curved, so I went in and put some more hammering on one side of this versus the other. So watch where you hammer. If you're going to be on one side, it's going to stretch that side. If you're on the other side, it stretches that one. If you stay in the middle, it just kind of is a general spreading. So now I have to compensate for some of my, see there's a curve going there. So I'm now going to come in and hammer more on the side that it's curving to, and that'll spread it out and straighten it out. There, see I'm straightening that out by coming in from this side over here. If I was on this side, I would accentuate that curve. So you can control all of that just by look where you're hammering, look at the reflection. Maybe this light's too bright here. Okay, that helps us a little bit. Look at your reflection. That tells you where your hammer is hitting. It tells you where you're not hitting. So if you want to do something and make your metal do something, make it do it. Look at those reflections. That's telling me my hammer was hitting over on this far edge over here. And that's what I wanted, so it spread that and straightened it. I want to flatten it a lot on the end because I think that's where it's going to curve around, and I want a nice flare. So I'm going to start hammering a little harder down here. See what happens. It's curving, so let's flip it. See, now I have that curve there. So I'm going to hammer on this lower edge down here and straighten up that curve a little bit. The edge closest to me. There, now see, I've straightened that up quite a bit by hammering on, let's see, so I hammered on this edge down here to get it to straighten up, and you can see my reflection of my hammer marks. And so that is how I straightened it. Now I'm going to just see how much, it's much thinner there, that's good. That's what I want. It's thin on that end, that's what I want. It's thick in the middle, which is what I want. And let's see, I think we've got plenty of material to do what I want. But let's just take this end out a little longer. A planishing hammer is really meant for planishing, which is a smoothing operation largely, where you don't want a lot of hammer marks. You're trying to minimize your hammer marks so you use a polished hammer, either a flat face. In fact, the flat face would remove and kind of homogenize your hammer marks. This has a little concave face, so that's going to put a hammer mark in. But the point is, your planishing hammer, whether it's your dome or your flat, you want to keep that really shiny, and so that when you hammer on something, it's not going to mar your surface. So I wasn't being very careful with this anvil surface here. You want to not mess up your planishing hammers by hitting your anvil surface, which will mar things. Now, this little domey hammer is not really meant for planishing. It's meant for chasing and repoussé, and I use it for stone setting. So marring up this head here is not a big concern for me, because that's what it's for. It's meant to hit tools. This side is just a little ball, and you know, if I bang on this, I'm not too concerned. But your planishing hammer, or some sort of, if you had a really cool, beautiful hammer like this little frets hammer, you do not want to be banging that on your steel. Protect it. It only goes on your non-ferrous metal, your silver and gold and copper and stuff. That's how you keep it nice. But these can be shined up and polished and refinished too, so don't panic if you put a divot in it. Just try not to. Now, I'm going to go anneal this one more time, and then we're going to shape it into our shape. We may want to put do a little filing. It's very hammer, you know, it's rough. Is that how I want it to look? Do I want it to look rough? Do I want it to look shiny? It's our choice. It's a choice you have. You can shine it, or you can texture it. Maybe in the long run I want a little bit of texture, but I don't want this texture. So I may have to put a different texture on it. And I can do that with a different kind of hammer, or I can do it with a file or some sort of a rotary wheel. I wonder what it would look like if I put like a cross peen on it. Oh, look at that. That's actually kind of a nice texture. Let's look at that. That would be prettier than just the general hammer texture here. See, I put that little cross peen on it. That made it a more directional kind of decorative look. And when I oxidize it, which I'll put some oxidation on it, that's going to show up better. So those are considerations, how you want this to look. But I like that type of texture better. And so maybe we'll have to do that on the whole thing. Let's try it a little bit. Yeah, I like that. What do you think of that? That's going to look nice oxidized, that directional kind of horizontal thing. So I'll probably go ahead and put that on my whole piece, and then when I anneal it, we'll be able to shape it around and then just touch it up somehow in the finished piece. So that way we don't have to refinish the whole thing with files. That would be a good idea. Okay. I have this piece of lovely sterling. Let's see if if we can zoom in on it a little bit. There we go. I've got a nice cross-peen texture on it. And now we're going to kind of form it around our bezel and basically follow the drawing. And where's my bunny? There's my bunny. Okay. Let's see if we can make this do what we want it to do. Put that right there. My favorite pliers for forming are something that you can't even get anymore. They're a half round, but they're sort of a needle nose half round, and they're just a pair of pliers I've used for 40 years, and they're my favorites. But there's many pliers. Mostly you want to use some sort of half round so that you don't put in extra tool marks. So we know that that's kind of where we're going to be bending. It's right around in this area. Not a very good Sharpie. That's where I want that bend to be. And this part will come around and then do this curl. This part will go down there and do that. So start with that concept. And this is a thick bezel, it's a thick stone. So I don't have to make this very flat. It can be quite dimensional if I want it to be. Here we go. I'm going to take this and I'm going to put the curved part on the inside of where I want it to curve. I'm going to bend this around, and it's annealed so it just bends nicely. It does what I want it to do. And if it gets too stiff, you just anneal it again. That's the third time I've annealed it. So as you can see, you can get it to do what you want to do. If this part here is too thick to bend the way I want it to, I'll just come in and thin it down with a sanding disc or a grinding wheel or something and make it thinner so it bends how I want it to. I could also at this point still go in and hammer it thinner because it's just right there. I just go hammer, hammer. What that'll do is harden it up again. I'll have to anneal it again. So I may do the thinning with the grinding wheel if I want to quicken this process. This has to flip around a little bit. So let's see how we do that. I want it to kind of do this. See if we can make it do that. Okay. Make this more pronounced. There. Now, let's see. So we want it to, we need this to start to, and I might trim some of this to conform to the cabochon, but let's see where we get here. It's moving pretty well because it's annealed. We also want it to move that way a little bit, so let's see. I have other pliers for this. Other forming pliers. So there's other types of pliers that will, form things for you very nicely. The idea is not to mar your work up though. So I have this pair of pliers here, which has but you want to put some leather in there to protect your material. I have these weird pliers with a plastic insert. Those might do what I want. I actually want this to go that way. I'm also trying these days to work a lot smarter with my hands. Oh, see, I kind of like that. So that I don't hurt myself as much as I used to, because that's what I used to do. So if I want this bail to come this direction, but this is very stiff now, how am I going to do that? I am going to use my vise. I'm going to show you how I do that because it'll be easy. A vise is a great tool. It isn't just for holding things, it's for helping you move things. And I moved some pretty stiff metal with it. Now, what we're doing here, we want to, here it is. I want to get this bale to go that direction and make a curve, but it's going a sideways and it's thick and it's not going to want to do it. So what I'm going to do is put it in the vise like this and pull it toward me this way, probably over here on the end. But I need to protect it, so I'm going to put in some leather. I'm going to close down the gap a little, make it just fit. Maybe open that gap up. Where do I want it to bend? Right about there, kind of eyeballing it. Get it in here, there. Now I don't want to move this one because it's going to go the opposite direction. I just want to move this one. So I can use my hands, I could use a hammer. I'm going to just try pulling it a little bit here. Okay, yeah, it's pulling over. But that's a way I can control that bend. So if you look at this, it was straight up, but now it's bending this way, and I'm actually just using my fingers to pull it over. There, look at that. That is what I was looking for. Let's take it out and see what we've actually accomplished. So that's what I'm trying to do, is get this to fit in there and have a nice place to sit. I may end up trimming this, I may end up bending this more, but that's how I'm starting this process. And use your tools to do the work for you. I think I'm going to bend it a little bit more. I think we're onto something good here. Tighten that up a little bit. And then I'm just going to pull it with my fingers again so you can see what I'm doing. There. I think that's probably good. Okay. Yeah. Look at that. That's a good shape. So it's a good starting place. Let's get some more bends going. You can see where we're starting to get where we're trying to go here. So I'm just going to keep working it, doing the bends I can with my pliers. When I need an assist so I don't hurt myself with my, using too much stress or bending the metal the wrong way, I'll devise some way to move it. Because that's kind of half the fun of this, is figuring out how to make things. Well, it's all the fun of it. Come on, who am I kidding? Move things slowly so that you can still move them back if you need to. If it gets too stiff, we'll just anneal it again. But now I'm going to try to put a little curlicue in here somehow. Get it to start with this one. Give it a little more curve. That's kind of the beginning of it. I'm going to have to anneal it to get that. Oh, that's going to be cute though, isn't it? I think I'm going to have to shave off a little of this dimension too to get it to bend where I want. But right now, I think we're good. I'm going to leave that side and go over here to the bale side, which is where I want this to curl around over here, right about in here. So let's keep working on that. Close this up a little bit. And then this part is going to come out this way. It might be getting, let's see, it's pretty stiff too, isn't it? Oh, where it's thinner, it's not nearly as stiff. There's all sorts of design considerations you can make along the way, of course. Okay, now we're getting pretty close to the concept here. I have to decide how much I want to bring that top piece in, quite a bit. I'm going to have to thin it to get that curl the way I want. It's just too thick to get it into that little tiny spiral, and the one on the bottom too. It's not a matter of annealing as much as it's a matter of actually thinning the metal, because I'm asking it to do a little too much. But I love my shape. Okay, I'm just going to keep working on this. I'm going to come in with you could use a file, you could use a sanding disc. Maybe we'll try a file here. See if that is where I should be. Just brace your work, come in. When you relieve metal and change your dimension, then you will increase its ability to move again, even without annealing it, just by making it thinner, taking away some of that hardened exterior. And I probably would refinish these outside edges to be smooth anyway and leave the texture really on that, the more decorative surface. So this is a step I might be doing anyway, I think. So that's thinner. Okay, now let's thin it up over here on the top area. Brace your work on your bench pin so that you get the maximum efficiency out of your strokes. Don't try to file things up here in the middle of the air. That's not an efficient way to get your filing done, that's for sure. So I can just thin this down to where it wants to move for me, because I really want to get a nice little curlicue there. Oops, noisy. Okay, that means I've got a bad angle. There we go. Okay, see how much thinner I've made that? That is going to, I think I'll thin this one down while I'm at it here. Get this one to curve better. Let's try moving it again, both of these. You don't always have to wind things, you can squeeze things to create shapes too. So if I squeeze, okay, I want to put a little gemstone in there and possibly a little sapphire. So it needs to be a dimension that will support that little head. So I do want it to get smaller. Still working on the outside of this curve. Now, when we get this also soldered in some places, that's going to anneal this again, so I can refine these little curves later after it gets annealed, when I won't have to do a specific annealing for these curves. Then it's gotten a weird angle here. Can see that? So you can just, you know, bend it. Take the angle out, and I'm going to brace against the bench pin and kind of push it that way, so I'm not using all my fingers. So I'm pushing against the bench pin there. And that put it in a better level. Right now, this is very flat, like flat this way. I want to put a little angle on it so that it actually angles up to this, so that bezel would be a straight wall like this, and I want this, right now it comes in kind of flat, I want it to come in at an angle. So instead of trimming this back, somehow I want to put an angle, get this to kind of tilt up. Right now it's very hard, so to do it I'm going to have to anneal it. But then I think I have a way to do it. So I'm going to anneal it one more time. We're annealed. It didn't take too long. Now, how am I going to get this little wall to tilt up a bit? I think I'll just use these pliers here, the same old half-round pliers, and just kind of work on it. I'll have to redo a few different angles, but I think I'm going to like it better, and it'll give it more dimension, because we're doing this to give this some real sculptural dimension. So if I want this to tilt up, what do? I tilt it up, and then I have to tilt this down. Okay, let's try that. So I'm going to use my pliers, and oh, it's very soft. It's very willing to tilt. Okay, excellent. Annealing is your miracle treatment. So this is tilting up nicely. Okay, so what is this doing here? Take this and we go like this. Okay, let's tilt it up some more. And what I probably should do is take another pair of pliers so that I can, and they're also half round, so I'm not going to put any marring where I don't want it, and I'm going to torque it like that. Ah, okay. So I torqued against, and it's very pliable right now. So let's see, what did that do to my concept? Okay, it's working, but now I have to tip this down so that the other seems like it's tipped up. So if we hold our pliers again and tip against something else, and yes, okay, I like it. This one has to come down more. So I'm just playing with my pliers, kind of making things do stuff, bracing it. Now I had to brace against the bench pin a little bit to get where I want it to be. Yeah, I like that. I like that better. It's undulating and looking very interesting. Okay, I'm going to work on it a little more. Try hanging it. Make sure it's balanced, and preferably with your stone. So I'm going to get a little piece of some wax here and try and stick this together and see if it hangs, because if it doesn't hang right, then you have to make some changes in your angles. That's really all there is to it usually. It's just angles of everything, but you got to do it. Okay, so let's see if we can smush that on there and get it to stick. So if I look at this, it's not balancing front to back yet, but it is balancing in terms of straightness. So always check that. But you can also adjust some of that by tilting the bail sideways one way or the other. But so I think we're going to be fine. If I just get this put in how I want, then it's going to hang well. That's good. A little bit more. So having this setting made and the bezel made my life a lot easier, because you're working around something concrete. You set a parameter that makes life easier in some projects. Okay. There. Now I think we're just about there. Now let's get that chain again. Now I've got it stuck in there with some friction, so that is good. Okay. Got our chain, and it hangs nice and straight. Yes. Look at that. Very nice. We're gonna go ahead and get this in some boric acid and alcohol. So let's say I'm going to use, just for fun, I'm going to use this mini torch instead of the bigger torch. And I'm going to use the same sort of neutral flame. It's a fairly large piece, so you know, this is, you're going to have to use your bigger tip, but you can definitely solder silver with this. So you do want to flux your areas, your seams. I've got some flux in this little bottle, so I'm just going to squeeze some on right there, and along this edge here. Extra flux is not a problem. Not enough is a problem. So you always don't worry about too much flux. It'll tend to burn off a little. And you have a nice neutral flame, not too hot, not too cool. This is enough flame to do what we're doing. I'm going to, let's see, what do we use? We'll use tweezers and place, now that I've dried off the piece, I'm going to place some solder on. And you should also put some flux on your solder. So I just put some on my little tile here, and then I dip the solder as I come over. So I'm going to place it right there. Place a piece on every joint. Medium solder should allow us to do this without melting anything. Although there's some thin pieces on my cutout on the back, so you do have to be aware. So I'm getting one more piece of solder right here. So now I'm going to use a pick, and that'll help me keep the solder right where I want it to be. Now let's hope my big fat head doesn't get in your way. So now, this little piece of solder right here has already formed a little ball. This little piece of solder has not, and that one hasn't. So you want them, when they ball up, a little more gas and a little more air here. When they ball up, you just want to make sure they ball up where they're supposed to be. This one looks like it's touching nicely both surfaces. So since we're down here, let's make it work. So you heat the whole piece. Don't spot weld silver. Try and heat your whole piece up. It does far better. I'm going to get my whole piece kind of warm. It's starting to get red. That one already went. Look at that. That's soldered beautifully right there. And then these, let's see, that one just did a good, oops, that one shifted a little bit there. But I think we're okay. Oh, this needs another piece there. I think we're still really good. I'm going to get another piece of silver. There was a little sag there, but that probably doesn't hurt a thing. So I'm going to get one more piece of silver because I do not have a good seam down here. This one did not get good contact. These two, this one and this one have very good contact. This one does not. So let's get this solder down into, it's a little bit big piece, but that's okay. We're going to get the solder in here, and we're going to put, it's going to want to get hot on this little piece first, so you don't put your heat there. Put it over here so the solder will come toward the heat. And I just move it and control your heat by moving that torch and build the heat slowly. There we go. Do you see that? It went right where we want it. Okay, lovely. Now, I think we actually have everything right where we want it. Let's find out. That hangs pretty good there, huh? Yep. I think it's good. What does it look like on the back? Oh, fun. That's haystack rock. Looks beautifully soldered. Minimal cleanup. We just have to pickle it and detail it and put our little head in and set our stones. And it's going to be great. So I'm going to proceed with that. It's just a lot of finishing rough edges, making sure you have textures where you want, and just refine it down. You know how to do the rest. This is lovely. I'm very happy. I'll show you when it's all finished. Here it is. I have finished it, and it looks pretty darn close to my sketch. Got my little bunny rabbit there, and the curlicues are pretty close to how I drew them, and so as I went along I made a few decisions just to, as the material, you know, I worked with the material and got it to move around and do what I want. And curlicue, I trimmed a little bit here and I trimmed a little bit to get the bezel to fit. I soldered in a tube setting here into this little curlicue there. I put the sapphire in it. It's really bright. The little bunny rabbit. I put a little loop on the back between his ears and then drilled the bottom of this here and put the loop through there. I still have to solder that. That's the last thing I'm going to do. That way it doesn't really show from the front because it's drilled through. And I put a little signature right here. It says M. Wong and then a 925. There you go. And this on the back is haystack rock in Cannon Beach, Oregon. And then I went for a bit of a satin finish versus a high polish because it's a rustic piece. I mean, it is a rock after all. So I wasn't going for a super finished commercial look. I was going more for like a little art piece. And I think I succeeded at that. So just remember, you can get material to do all sorts of things for you if you just take the time to anneal it and work it to your advantage. So I think my mom's gonna like it though. She's probably gonna go crazy. It's not anything really out of this world, but it's fun and a little reminder of our trip.